timing of everything here worked out really well because today we are going to be talking about the New York Knicks, who just 2 days ago fired the head coach Tom Thibodeau. They're going to have some changes this summer, this offseason. It's going to look a little different than what we probably anticipated it looking like, just because I don't think, not that it's a surprising firing, but I don't think too many people were anticipating the move happening, especially that quickly, especially after Jalen Brunson pretty publicly backed Tom Thibodeau after they lost the series. But changes will be happening. And if there is a coach that is going to be fired and it's going to impact fantasy basketball a lot, it's Tibbs, because we're going to probably see a pretty different rotation from New York next season. We also could see different moves being made to put together a different team, different roster, different rotation for next season, because now they're going to be catering to a new head coach and a new head coach's play style, which could also impact the players on the court, how they're used. We won't have a lot of those answers until they hire someone, and it may not be a quick thing. So it's going to be kind of interesting to dive into the Knicks and try and recap what they did and take a look ahead, because there's a lot of unknown here. But we will do our best to talk everything through, at least based on what we know. But before we get into it, I just wanted to remind you guys that BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all your sports betting action. We've got baseball season in full swing. We're deep into the NBA and NHL finals. Actually, it's going to be game one tonight for the NBA finals. Thunder still favored by 9.5, heavy favorites in the series. If you want to get in on the action either way, if you feel that everybody's sleeping on the Pacers, or if you think, yeah, it's pretty much guaranteed that the Thunder are going to win this thing, regardless, BetOnline's a great place to get in on the action. They have the latest odds, news, and scores, and even live in-game betting while the games are being played. We also keep the dog digs of the summer rolling with the largest selection of odds on everything, with updated odds on the MLB, UFC, and boxing to tennis and NFL futures. BetOnline remains the best online source for all your sports wagering info. BetOnline, the game starts here. Okay, let's talk about the New York Knicks, and we'll just take a quick look at what happened this year. Went 51-31, lost in the Eastern Conference Finals to the Pacers. I think they didn't look great in the first round. It was not that they looked bad, but it was a really tough series against the Pistons team. And the expectation was basically that they were going to go to the second round and probably get swept by Boston. Everyone remembers the stat that was thrown around all regular season. The Knicks haven't beat the Thunder, Cavs, or Celtics. Everyone remembers that. I thought it was a pretty weird stat to talk about because, well, yes, you could say, yes, the Knicks haven't beaten all these teams yet. But they don't have to do it during the regular season. They do it during the playoffs. That's when they need to do it. And no, they didn't advance to face the Thunder, but they were able to beat the Celtics in a series. Prior to Jason Tatum getting hurt, it still looked like the Knicks were going to win. So there's no excuse there. The Knicks earned that. And then they just ran into a very hot Pacers team that's been one of the best teams in basketball since January after kind of a slow start to the year. But I still think it was a very successful season for the Knicks and one of their most successful in a very, very long time. But that's the thing about professional sports, is that sometimes teams make decisions where it's not necessarily a fair decision, but they're doing what they think is best for the team. Whether or not they're right, we'll see. But if they don't believe that Tom Thibodeau can lead this team to win an NBA championship next season, then they made the right move. Is anyone that's questioning the move very confident that this team would have had a chance to win the NBA Finals next year? I'm not. So I don't think that that's a huge knock on Tibbs. I don't think that that's saying he's a bad coach. I think it's just to say, with the way things are currently constructed, with the way the roster is, do the Knicks feel like he can lead them to a championship? He can be the coach that leads them to a championship. If they don't feel like that, then why would they continue to just, let's give him one more year? Well, if you just give him another year and it doesn't work out again, and you kind of knew it wasn't going to work out again, then you're wasting another year that you're paying all these players. You're wasting a year off some of their primes. You have Jalen Brunson playing the best basketball of his career. Do you waste those years? So we'll see what the Knicks decide to do. sometimes teams make decisions like this, and you say, well, maybe they'll make a good hire, and then they make a dumb hire, and you're like, okay, well, this isn't better. Like the other one may not have been good enough, but this isn't better. So we'll see what New York ends up doing. But what they have to work with this summer, they have the 50th pick in the draft. They do not have their first round pick. It is going to be going to the Nets in the Mikal Bridges trade. They have their own first next year. They also have a top 10 protected first from Washington. Probably won't happen. I don't think that Washington's pick will be outside the top 10, so they'll probably keep that. But if it does hop outside the top 10, Knicks could have 2 first-round picks next year, and I'm not sure exactly how that will continue to convey if it doesn't convey next season, if it would move to like a 2027 other type of protection first, or if it would move on to second-round picks. We'll see. And then they have potentially their own first in 2028, but it's a pretty complex swap. It's like 7 lines of words on Fanspo. So I'm not reading all of it, and I'm not going to try and deduce exactly every single scenario, but there is multiple. And then they have their own pick in 2030 that's unprotected, but they've traded away their 2027, their 2029, their 2031 firsts, their first this year, obviously, and then probably don't get their pick in 2028, but could get a pick in 2028. So there's not a ton of draft capital here to work with. And I think that is a frustration with Knicks fans that I've seen, is that they traded, 5 firsts for Bridges? And it's like, if they would have just waited a little longer, like Mikal Bridges is good. Is he 5 first good? Did they have to pay a tax basically to get him from Brooklyn, who's right there next to them, kind of a rivalry, and to get the Nova boys back together? It's like, did Brooklyn say, yeah, we know how bad you want this thing, like you're giving us more picks, you're going to have to give us more picks? Maybe that's what happened. But now you look at this summer and you're like, well, shoot, Giannis is available potentially, Kevin Durant's potentially available. Would you have been more likely to trade away 5 firsts for Giannis? Yes. Probably give up a little bit more than that as well. So the Knicks don't have a ton of draft capital to work with. They have some pieces to trade, but not a ton that's super exciting. And just who they have under contract for next season, we got Karl-Anthony Towns, OG Anunoby, Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart, of course, Mitch Robinson, Deuce McBride, Pacome Dedier, Tyler Kolek, all of them under contract. And then there's a team option for PJ Tucker and Ariel Hukporti. Precious Achiuwa, Campaign, Landry Shamet, DeLon Wright, all set to be unrestricted free agents. And then Marjan Beauchamp is a restricted free agent. A couple other players as well that weren't anywhere near cracking the rotation. So basically the Knicks have their core. And whoever the next head coach is going to come and try and lead this team that has a starting 5 that's all between 28 and 30 years old. So right in the middle of their prime, not too many years left to be playing their best basketball. And then a couple other players, Mitch Robinson's 27, Miles McBride 25, Kolek is 24, and then Dedier is 20, and whoever they get in the second round as well. So you could say that some of these non-starters will have some trade value. But we've seen 2 teams, or we are seeing 2 teams in the NBA Finals that are incredibly deep. And we're seeing this as like teams are like, to have success in today's NBA, you need to have a lot of depth. You need to have I forgot who wrote it, but it was like the weak link era in the NBA, which basically you're trying to avoid having weak links in your lineup, because if you don't have a complete, well-rounded lineup, teams are going to take advantage of you. So did the Knicks sacrifice depth to try and get better starters? Like, is that what they're looking to do? Or are they trying to get more depth? Are they going to zig when others zag? Or are they going to try and follow the model that worked for teams this year? Not sure. I think depending on the head coach, it's going to be a big factor there. But there seems to be a number of stars that will be available this summer. Every report is indicating that this is going to be one of the most active trade markets, one of the most active off seasons in a really long time. So we'll see if the Knicks are part of that. I think if they don't feel like Karl Anthony Towns was good enough defensively, which there was already reports about that, and they want to trade him and maybe get players that aren't as good or as, I guess, don't have like that all-star upside, but can be more effective in the playoffs, especially on defense. Maybe they opt to do something like that. Just throwing out some speculation here, but there's no massive reports or credited reports that are suggesting that the Knicks are actively looking to move anybody. We'll probably see more of those this summer from like every team. So we'll be keeping an eye on the rumors and the reports, but right now they're going to be looking to add a new head coach. And I think whether you were watching the games or if you just go back and look at stats, it's pretty clear that the Knicks lacked a lot of diversity in the offense. I know I wrote about it in my column or the roundtable column that we did at NBC, talking about Tibbs being fired, about how the Knicks ran more isolation basketball in the playoffs than basically every other. I think more isolation plays per NBA.com's stats than any other team in the league in the playoffs. And their assist percentage, they assisted on fewer made shots than almost every other team in the playoffs. I think Boston had a lower assist percentage, and then a couple of teams that lost in the first round, mostly in 4 or 5 games, were either higher or a pretty similar assist percentage. So basically, the offensive play style was like Jalen Brunson, go figure it out. And you can read reports, listen to videos, because you can go back to Jeff Teague. I don't remember if that clip just resurfaced recently or if he was just saying it recently about how like Tibbs he just gets mad, like he doesn't like coach specifically on offense, and I don't think that that's necessarily the case, but it could be because Jeff Teague did play for him. And then you look at a lot of the offense was just running through Jalen Brunson. And of course, he's playing at a freaking high level. And it's like, okay, maybe our best option is just to run Jalen Brunson ISOs because this dude is making shots. But I think if we could see a head coach that is able to, I guess, install a little bit more creativity in the offense, that would make buckets for Brunson easier. And they obviously have a very talented starting lineup, one of the best starting lineups in the NBA. Maybe they can go further next year. But we'll see what ends up happening. As far as some of the players, I don't think that like these guys hold a ton of dynasty value despite being a really good team. Like they're very impactful players, but like I said, they don't have a ton of depth. They have a couple players that we'll mention. And then their best players aren't phenomenal for like a category fantasy league. I would say that Cat is the most valuable player, but we'll get into some more specifics talking about some of these guys. First up will be Jalen Brunson, who averaged 26 points, 2.9 rebounds, 7.3 assists, 2.3 threes per game, shot almost 49% from the field, which I think is one of the more impressive stats for a 6'2 guard, was that he averaged 26 points per game and shot 48.8% from the floor. It's a pretty impressive mark to hit. New career high in assists for him. He's averaged at least 6 assists per game every year since he was traded, or since he signed with New York, didn't trade. And then a career high 7.3 per game this year. The 3-point percentage went down slightly, but still shooting that at a high rate. He's just a really efficient player, especially as a scorer for an undersized guard. But obviously he's a strong undersized guard. And he's going to continue to be an elite scorer for at least a couple more years. I don't know how gracefully his game will age because, I mean, he is a strong player, but he's an undersized player. So if he loses any bit of quickness or athleticism as he gets into the 30s, then he may not be able to average 25 points per game. And a lot of what he does in fantasy is score a lot, get assists, and then he's pretty efficient about doing it, but he doesn't get defensive stats. Obviously not a great rebounder. Not terrible, but like 3 rebounds per game isn't doing too much. And then he's efficient. So could definitely see his scoring take a pretty decent. I mean, he's a very smart player too. So I'm not saying he'll be just totally useless when he hits 32 years old, but I think some of the quickness is what makes him like as effective as a scorer. Because if you want to talk about all the flopping and or anything like that, all that stuff takes, you have to be like really like able to time everything really well and really quick in your decision making to be able to get these players, these defenders, to make mistakes or to fall for your tricks. You can't do that if you're slow. So as Jalen Brunson gets older, maybe some of those tricks don't work as well. And he's still so good even without all of that other stuff, which I think is probably my main frustration. And this isn't, we're just talking about Brunson, but like anyone who flops in the NBA, my main frustration is like the players that do it are all the ones that are able to score 30 a night, any given night. I'm like, I just would rather watch you score 30 a night than to watch you with the antics. But I get it. You got to play the game, and the refs are part of the game. And if you can play the refs or bait defenders and you get rewarded for it, you got to do what you got to do. But this isn't going to turn into a flopping rant or anything like that. Because even if that's what happens, this stuff works. Jalen Brunson's been very good in fantasy basketball. Now, for category leagues, he does have, a lack of defensive stats and not too many rebounds. Those types of things don't just kind of put a cap on how much of an impact he can have in a category league. But if you cater your team to his strengths, there's a handful, but there's not a ton of players that can average 26 points and 7 assists per game in a season. There's a few, not too many, which makes Jalen Brunson fairly unique and very impactful, even if the strict direct 9 cap value doesn't necessarily reflect how good he is. Moving along, I'm going to bring up the player that I said probably holds the most value in Dynasty leagues. And that's Karl Anthony Towns, who averaged 24.4 points per game, 12.8 rebounds, 3.1 assists per game. Also was able to add, as I try and get everything to load up out of the Jalen Brunson page, was also able to add 1 steal per game. Not a great shot blocker, 0.7 blocks, and then 2 threes per game, shot 52.6% from the floor, 42% from 3. There were not question marks, but we definitely saw Cat's value take a hit during his last 2 seasons in Minnesota. But he was playing next to Rudy Gobert. And he went from a dynamic stretch big to a tall stretch 4, which, his rebounds took a hit. Played more on the perimeter, but rebounds took a hit. Was never a great shot blocker, but was under a block per game for the first time in his career. 3 seasons ago, depending on how you want to say it. The 2022-2023 season, he averaged 0.6 blocks per game. First time in his career under a block per game. The points were also some of the worst marks of his career during his last 2 seasons, 20.8 and 21.8. Not everything, but it got better this year. Field goal percentage improved. The points were back up to 24.4. As I said, the 12.8 rebounds were actually a new career high for him. The assists were still decent for a big. He's a pretty good passer for a big. The blocks didn't come back. But, okay. I'm not too concerned about blocks because, again, he was at, the last few years before Gobert there, 1.1 and 1.2. So it's not like he went from 1.8 or 2 per game to less than 1. He's still making his mark by being a 2010 threat that can space the floor and is a okay passer or a good passer for a big. And I don't think that'll change next year, barring any sort of trade that sends him elsewhere. And I don't really expect that to happen. I think that you can have your frustrations about his defensive ability, and the reports came out within 24 hours after they were eliminated, but he's still one of the most dynamic centers in the game. And I think it just boils down to making good on his strengths as opposed to complaining about his weaknesses. We need to see him become more involved on offense in the playoffs. He averaged 21.4 points per game during this postseason, which you'd like to see him utilized more, considering he took 15.8 shots per game during the playoffs and took 16.9 per game during the regular season. So, not a dramatic hit, but a slight decrease in shots per game. I think if there's more of a priority to get him involved, because Cat has a reputation for not being a great playoff performer. And if you look at the numbers, that kind of reflects that. He isn't as effective in the postseason as he is during the regular season. But I don't think that's enough for them to just give up on him. I think realizing that he is a dynamic offensive player, and maybe we need to work on getting him going and finding ways to put him in positions to have success, as opposed to just saying, well, it's not as good as we were hoping it would be on offense, and the defense is so bad that if you're not making up for it on offense, then what are we doing? I think so, like I said at the beginning, some more offensive creativity could open things up for Cat. But for the most part, he wasn't as good as they probably needed him to be, which is why they weren't able to make it to the NBA Finals. But still a successful season. First season in New York for him. Was also pretty good. First stretches during the playoffs is not as good as they probably needed him to be. But I don't expect him to get traded, but it is a scenario. But if it happen and he ends up on a new team, hopefully it's not where he's sharing the minutes down low again like he did with Rudy Gobert. Hopefully he is a true center, regardless of where he plays next season. But I would say it's probably a 95% chance that he is back with New York. All right, keeping on down the list of leading scorers, we have OG Anunoby, who averaged 18 points per game, 4.8 rebounds, 2.2 assists. This was his first full season in New York, was traded at the deadline last season. 18 points, new career high. He also averaged 1.5 steals, 2.3 threes. Was more part of the offense than they needed him to be than he was at any point of his career in Toronto. He did have a year or two where he shot more. I think it was just one season where he took more shots per game than he did with the Knicks this year, but he was more efficient with New York, which was good to see. 2.3 threes per game, shot at 37.2%, almost a block per game as well. I don't think that too much is going to change for OG next year. I think he'll continue to be a decent scoring option. Not too many assists, a handful of rebounds, but really making his money on the defensive end with the defensive stats. Hopefully, he can stick around a block per game. That was nice. During his 23 games with New York, during the 23-24 season, he was at a block per game. Prior to that, his career high was 0.7. So maybe he's able to stick around a block. And then a steal and a half is great. If he can stay around there, maybe you see that increase, that would be awesome. But he's going to continue to be guarding talented scorers on the other team. They're not going to hide OG Anunoby. They're going to make sure that he is guarding the best player. So he's going to be guarding the ball a lot and have opportunities to get steals, force turnovers, get blocks. So hopefully we can see those numbers at least remain consistent, if not improve, and then continuing to be a floor spacer for them and score in other ways. Not too much is going to change. I think this is going to be probably the best, or hopefully be the best stretch of OG's career over the next few years. Obviously just an unreal, incredible defender, and hit some tough shots during the playoffs. I don't think that you're too concerned about what he can do in the postseason. So he'll definitely stick around. He's also able to play 74 games this year, which was the most since his rookie season. Was that a case of it was just a lucky year? Because he has had a couple of years where he didn't play quite as many games. A couple of years in the 40s. And then last year, he was at a total of 50 games between the Raptors and Knicks. Hopefully, we're able to see a similar level of health moving forward, but it's never a guarantee. I think that was one thing with the Knicks is that they didn't really have any health issues this year. And a lot of times in the playoffs, it comes down to who's the healthiest team. And the Knicks were, their guys were banged up, but during the regular season, this was a very healthy team, especially with the starting lineup. I know Mitch Robinson was out for most of the year, so they weren't at full strength, but they had the full starting lineup for most of the season, which was good. Hopefully that's something that is a trend that can continue next year, which it's just interesting that they were able to have that, I guess, level of health, considering how much Tom Thibodeau plays his guys. And I guess now that I'm thinking about it, I talked about what a new head coach would need to do, I guess, or would probably do differently. Hopefully have more creativity on offense, which can make things easier on everyone. But the main fantasy impact with a new head coach is that they're probably not going to be playing their starters as much as Tom Thibodeau always has. I believe, from what I remember from writing an article, all 5 starters were over 35 minutes per game, or at least 35 minutes per game. And I think Josh Hart, OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges were all over 36. Like, there's not too many teams that are playing their starters quite that much because there's the idea that you want to keep them as fresh as possible over an 82-game season. But then you also have to win 16 more games in the playoffs to win a championship. So why are you not wasting all their minutes, but like really putting a heavy workload on these guys all regular season and then hoping that they're still able to play at a super high level in April, May, and hopefully into June. So we'll probably see a lot of these guys take hits in minutes, maybe by only a couple per game, but we may see everyone's numbers drop ever so slightly. Or maybe being extra fresh will help them to maintain their level of production just because they have 3 fewer minutes per game on their knees every game, so they just feel a little fresher and maybe one more shot goes in per game, things like that. I don't think that's going to really decimate anyone's fantasy value, but we'll probably see these guys lose out on at least a couple minutes per game. So we'll see how that plays out next season. I think that'll probably have more of an impact in a redraft league than how you value some of these guys in Dynasty, but it's a factor. Moving on, we have Mikal Bridges, the Iron Man, who doesn't miss games, played 82 games again this year. 17.6 points per game, 3.2 rebounds, 3.7 assists, shot 50% from the floor, was under a steal per game for the first time in his career, only at half a block, 2 threes per game. Just kind of an underwhelming first season in New York. He was really good the last couple of years in his last couple of seasons in Phoenix, and then had a really strong start to his tenure in Brooklyn. And I remember there was a report where basically, I think it was after the season, he was talking about that they didn't have time to install a new offense or anything. So he was just running all the plays and running all the sets that were originally designed for Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. So he was able to get a lot of shots and score a ton during that first stretch. And then he was okay the next full season in Brooklyn. And then his production understandably took a hit this year despite playing 37 minutes per game, which was a career high. I think that Bridges you can always say like, injuries happen whenever. Hopefully Mikal Bridges is able to continue to be as healthy as he has been throughout his entire career. I don't think he'll play 37 minutes per game again next year. Hopefully that helps keep him a little fresher so he's able to be maybe more productive next year, because it was a little bit of an underwhelming season, but a lot of his value is tied to the fact that he has played every single game since he entered the NBA. And if you have that versus a player who's more productive, but at most is going to play 70 games, like you have an extra 12 games of Bridges, that's huge. Maybe you have a guy who is going to play 55 games. And he's going to be awesome when he does it, but Bridges is going to play 27 more games. Maybe it's a Joel Embiid type where you're like, I have no idea how many games this guy's going to play next year. Or a Zion Williamson type where you're like, I hope he's healthy and when he's on the floor, he's good, but things just happen with him. But then you have Mikal Bridges, who it's like, again, the caveat, anything can happen. But he hasn't missed a game yet in his career. So that gives him a little bit of extra value. Hopefully he stays healthy. Don't want to talk about it so much that I jinx it, but I think if you talk about the phrase the best availability or the best ability is availability, Bridges fits that, and it's definitely his edge in fantasy basketball is the fact that he is just simply going to play more games than most other players. Whether you're in a dynasty league or a redraft league, that's valuable over the course of a full season. But then you get into your fantasy playoffs and you're going to have him for those games, but he's not as productive as certain other players. And you're like, okay, well, maybe this player was in and out of the lineup all year, but then he was healthy for the 3 or 4 weeks of my fantasy playoffs, and that would be much better than Bridges. So there's obviously pros and cons to it, but he'll continue to be a decent option. I don't expect his numbers to drop tremendously next year. The main thing is he's going to play a lot of basketball. Another guy who played even more minutes than Mikal Bridges was Josh Hart, who played 37.6 minutes per game and played 77 games, which is pretty unreal. The last year in New York, he played 81 games at 33.4 minutes per game. So Tom Thibodeau was literally like, no, I'm going to play him even more this year. Averaged 13.6 points, 9.6 rebounds, 5.9 assists, 1.5 steals, 1.1 threes per game. The 9.6 rebounds were a career high. The 5.9 assists were a career high. The 1.5 steals were a career high. He was a player going much later in redraft leagues, and he ended up being one of the biggest steals in fantasy because there isn't too many players that are averaging almost 10 rebounds and 6 assists per game and a steal and a half. He doesn't give you a ton of scoring, but if you're punting points, Josh Hart's an incredible fit for your team. And even if you're not punting points, you don't need everyone to be a 25 point per game scorer because there's only so many of those. 13.6 isn't shabby. It's pretty good. But he also shot 52.5% from the floor. So it wasn't like he just saw this huge, unsustainable increase in offensive volume. He just was more efficient. And maybe that part's the unsustainable part. He wasn't great from three, but he shot 33.3% on 3.3 attempts per game from three, if that's enough threes for you. But he shot efficient from the floor. Hopefully he's able to repeat that, but that's not a guarantee. The year before, he shot 43.4% from the free throw or from the floor. Now, prior to that, he had been shooting over 50% for the last couple of years. But even if he's not able to maintain that, the rebounds and the assists and the steals should continue to be there. And that's where he'll make most of his impact in fantasy. All right, so that's the starting lineup. We'll keep it moving with New York's sixth man. That's Deuce McBride, who averaged 9.5 points, 2.5 rebounds, 2.9 assists per game. Also added in a steal per game, as well as 1.8 threes per game. Career highs basically across the board for him. This was a really good season for Deuce. Has proved himself to be, a former second-round pick that barely saw the floor during his first 2 years in the league. Has seen his role continue to increase, and he's been more and more productive. We could definitely see his role increase even more next year. He was at 24.9 minutes per game. Could we see that get to 28 if a new coach comes in, wants to have a more balanced rotation? Definitely. And maybe we see his assists go up or his threes go up. I don't think that this is going to be a potential Peyton Pritchard type season, but we could definitely see Deuce McBride as a slow riser through the Knicks organization, where he kind of was an end of the bench guy and slowly worked his way into being the team's sixth man and be a really solid scorer for them off the bench. He was at 9.5 points. Could we see him get to 12 or 13 next year if his minutes go up? Yeah. He's at 2.9 assists. Could we see him get to 4.5 assists if his minutes go up? Sure. And then he's already pretty effective from three. So I'm not saying this is a guy that in a redraft league you're going to want to take a late round flyer on, but he definitely holds value in a dynasty league. He probably holds trade value for the Knicks if they aren't wanting to move him. Maybe he lands in a situation where he plays even more. I think that Deuce McBride definitely holds some value. Not a tremendous amount of value, but he's one of the more valuable players on New York's bench. So don't discount him, I guess, is what I'm trying to say here. But there also isn't too much to go into because we don't know exactly who the next head coach is. If we said it was Tibbs, if we knew it was Tibbs, I would say, oh, okay, like, yeah, this guy's sitting on the bench, but like, it's Tom Thibodeau, so I don't know. Played 24.9 minutes per game this year, so to Tibbs' credit, he did use him. But maybe we could see his role continue to increase. 24 years old. I think there's definitely something there. Mitch Robinson, we know who he is. Didn't play a lot during the regular season because he was injured for most of the year. But when he's on the floor, strong rebounder, high field goal percentage, incredibly athletic shot blocker, was at 1.1 blocks and 0.9 steals to go with his 5.1 points, 5.9 rebounds. Only played 17 games this year. Didn't make his debut until the last day of February. So he was just trying to get his legs under him to be ready for the playoffs, and he was very effective in the postseason. Now, teams quickly forced him to the free throw line because that's not a strong suit for him. But I think as long as he's there in New York, maybe he is a trade piece, but if he's still there in New York, backing up Karl Anthony Towns, maybe playing some time, is part of a too big lineup. An effective rebounder. His minutes were down this year, so the rebounds weren't quite as good. Effective shot blocker, high field goal percentage, and the field goal percentage is going to be higher than his free throw percentage. That has been the case in every season of his career prior to this year, but it's a much smaller sample size. He shot 68.4% from the free throw line, which was a career high. But again, 17 games, 17 minutes per game, 1.1 free throw attempts per game. All those were career lows. But typically, I mean, look back, Mitch Robinson's field goal percentage is close to 70% for most of his career. And his free throw percentage has been below 50% more often than it's been above 50%. Not too many players have that big of a difference between their field goal percentage and free throws percentage in a way that their field goal percentage is the higher one. I mean, in the 2021-22 season, Mitch Robinson shot 76.1% from the floor and 48.6% from the line. It's almost a 30% difference, which is just wild to think about. But all that to be said, we know his strengths. Rebounds, blocks, field goal percentage. We know his weaknesses. Free throw percentage. Assists. He's not doing anything there. Points, not really doing anything there. Threes, obviously not shooting those. And then he can get around a steal per game, which is also nice. If he gets traded, then we see him in a situation where he's starting. Maybe we see him in a situation where he's the starting center for a team with a really good pick and roll point guard. And maybe we see Mitch Robinson get some easy lobs and gets a career high in points per game. That's possible. But I think we pretty much know what he is at this point, know how to value him. Not too much is probably going to change for him. Hopefully he's just healthier than he has been the last 2 years. And then there's some players that we don't really need to do too much discussion about because there's not a ton of value in that, especially in dynasty leagues, like a Cameron Payne, a DeLon Wright, a PJ Tucker, a Landry Shamet. Like there's just not too much to talk about there. Precious Achiuwa is an intriguing player, but he's going to be a free agent this summer, so I don't really see a scenario where he signs and is able to start somewhere. But if that happens, cool, increase his value. Not a player to really be too excited about at this point of his career in dynasty leagues. There's a couple players that are worth mentioning as players worth stashing. That's we mentioned at the beginning, Tyler Kolek, who was a pretty solid player in college and just didn't really crack the rotation in New York, but a really good passer that if he sees a larger role, he can be a good source of assists. Pacome Didier, who was just he was a first-round pick for the Knicks this last summer. Just super raw, super young. So he's definitely like a project on the bench, but just worth stashing because the Knicks are ready to win now. But if he just continues to progress, maybe at some point he becomes part of the rotation in a few years. And then another second-round pick, Ariel Hukporty. Saw some time, not much, but did have a couple stretches or a couple games. Let me pull up the specific games because I remember him being part of the rotation at some point or getting some sort of chance. But he only averaged 1.9 points per game, 2 rebounds per game this year. There's a couple times in February where he played almost 20 minutes. Had a game in November where he played 30 minutes and had 7 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, and 4 blocks. Just some guys that are worth stashing at this point. Upside swings. No guarantee that they're going to be anything really. But maybe if things work out their way, they can be have a chance to be effective on a team that doesn't have a ton of future pieces to be super excited about. Those are the guys. So maybe in a few years, once this starting lineup has run its course, those guys are able to be part of the rotation or slowly be part of the rotation and then eventually become starters. There's a chance for that. No, nothing's guaranteed. But those are the young guys in New York to stash. But that's going to do it for the Knicks. I'm sure we'll talk more about what this team is going to look like once they have a head coach in place. We've got 3 teams left to talk about after this. And obviously 2 of them are playing in game 1 of the finals tonight. So we're going to wait to talk about them until after the finals are over, depending on how long the series goes. If it ends up going 7 games, I think it'll end 3 days before the draft. So we may delay those episodes to after the draft. We may do those episodes and draft episodes the same day, but we're going to pretty quickly after we do the Timberwolves tomorrow shift to talking a lot more about this upcoming draft class. We've got a few guests booked, trying to book some more, both fantasy analysts, dynasty analysts, and genius draft scout guys to hopefully give a bunch of different unique perspectives on some of these players, which will hopefully be really helpful. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Young Man Squad Fantasy Basketball Podcast. As always, I would appreciate if you liked, commented, and subscribed to the channel on these episodes. Helps me out a ton. You can also follow me at NoRibbon22. I try and do my best about tweeting everything out. My blue sky is the same, NoRibbon22.bsky. Whatever else it is. Try and do my best about posting it. If not, Dan posts from the Old Man Squad Twitter, and he's much better about posting everything than I am. So shout out to Dan. But that's going to do it for this episode, and I will see you guys tomorrow.